Coming up, legal expert Mpumelelo Zigalala weighs in on the Eskom load shedding court order. South African Tourism will be hosting the Tourism Indaba on the 10th of May in Durban with the specific objective of creating market access for its African leisure tourism products. The Peace and Security Council will meet to discuss the instability in the Sudan. Well, it's a warm welcome to you. We're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Tsepiso Makwetla. You're watching The Week Ahead. And please remember, interact with us on social media platforms. We're on Twitter at Week Ahead, hashtag Week Ahead. And we'll be bringing you now the latest news and also what's surely to be headline news in the next week. South African Tourism will be hosting the Tourism Indaba on the 10th of May in Durban with the specific objective of creating market access for its African leisure tourism products. Africa's Travel Indaba is a 3-day trade show followed by a business opportunity networking day or bond day, which seeks to create a platform for thought leadership, knowledge sharing and obtaining the latest in global trends and local insights, of course. The trade show exists to provide a platform for African tourism exhibitors to showcase their offerings to international local buyers, destination marketing companies and leisure tourism service partners. For more on this, we're joined now by SA Tourism Communications and Stakeholder Relations General Manager Thandiwe Matibela. Thandiwe, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Good afternoon, Tsepiso, and good afternoon to all the viewers. And thank you so much for inviting me here today.
It's such a pleasure. Now, I want to start with, obviously, for those who are familiar, they know that it's a staple on the calendar annually. But for those who aren't really clued up on this event, what is the Tourism Indaba and why should one want to attend or even be associated with it?
Africa's Travel Indaba, as you say, is an established staple. It's been around for in excess of 40 years. It is where the African travel tourism sector comes together with the aim of growing our sector. And now more than ever, it's important following the COVID-19 pandemic. We then invite delegates from various parts of the world for them to come and experience different products from the rest of the African continent, so that they then can package and go sell and promote Africa to various travelers from across the world. Why would you want to attend Africa's Travel Indaba is that if you're a business person who is into the tourism sector, this is the best place to come for interactions, this is the best place to come for networking, and this is the best place to come for networking opportunities as well as doing business. And of course, if you're an exhibitor, you want to be at Africa's Travel Indaba because you want to showcase your products to the best of the global tourism sector.
And while you're speaking, I was just wondering, as we are looking ahead to very major economic events that are coming up. I'm thinking of the BRICS summit that we're all looking towards, but most importantly, the Intra-Africa Trade Fair. That's also going to have a business forum in the next week. So we're talking about interconnectivity within African countries. Talk a little bit more about if this is going to be a point of focus and how are you navigating these waters, going beyond borders with the tourism sector.
One of the things that we know for sure is that we will never grow if we work separately. There's power in collaboration, and Africa is a formidable force. And whether it is today or tomorrow or any other of the events that we're doing in the build-up to Africa's Travel Indaba, that key focus is there. Today, we are having an industry-wide, South African industry-wide conference, which is the SABC conference. And again, the importance of the African travel sector has come up. The Minister of Tourism will actually be addressing the SABC conference today at 1500, and that will be one of the key areas that she will touch on. But even as we go towards Africa's Travel Indaba, tomorrow is our Business Opportunity Networking Day, which is the day that precedes the actual trade show that starts on the 9th of May. During those discussions, we are making sure that we empower both businesses, both from here and from various parts of the world, from various parts of the continent, to interact and be able to get a knowledge sharing economy experience through the various experts that will be here. And that is what we're doing in terms of ensuring that we all start off the same page. Interconnectivity is a big theme here at Africa's Travel Indaba. There are different sessions and different airlines and different other partners that will be at Africa's Travel Indaba that will actually be highlighting that very key point. Our own minister is very clear about the importance of us collaborating as a sector and as various tourism stakeholders. We will be having a big media discussion on Tuesday the 9th that will touch also on interconnectivity. Like you say, there's big events like the BRICS summit that are coming through, and those will succeed when we all work together. Those will succeed when there is seamless travel across the African continent. So that is a very important point and a very key theme here at Africa's Travel Indaba this year.
And I'd like to hear your thoughts on some of the people who are perhaps going to be showcased at this event, who's going to be having discussions about particularly strategic integrated development and marketing around African tourism. I mean, we always talk about the dearths in terms of infrastructure and the expense thereof. But it's time to get beyond that and talk about how we can use the resources that we have to do better and grow better.
And that is exactly it. And I really like how you put it when you say it's time to grow beyond that. Because yes, there's a time for us to acknowledge our challenges, but also there's a time for us to put up our sleeves and make sure that we step into action so that we can grow our tourism sector. What the COVID-19 pandemic really taught us is that we really have ourselves, to blame if we're really not growing as we should. Because when the world was not coming to the African continent, we traveled to the continent. Similarly, that happened here in South Africa domestically. So it really is about our own self owning, our challenge and really taking forward our tourism sector. And again, as I say, a very key focus here at Africa's Travel Indaba this year is that in all the sessions that we're going to have, we're going to show up as a sector that is in partnership, as a sector that has got one goal, and that goal is for us to work together, to partner up for working towards our tourism sector recovery plan. Because if you know, when COVID hit in 2019, 2020, as a sector, we came up together and we said, this thing is restricting movement and therefore it's going to affect our tourism sector. What plan do we have in place for us to recover once we're over COVID? And now we are seeing the tourism sector recovery plan in action. And I must say it's very encouraging how each and every part of the value chain has come together to make sure that our sector actually grows even beyond the COVID-19 levels.
You know, when you're talking about COVID-19, and I want to latch on to the thought of brand Africa in particular, we saw very unnecessary travel bans considering how Africa was less affected than other tourism destinations. And I'm wondering what you are doing in terms of the knowledge sharing that you were speaking about. Perspective is everything, and we need to push forward, our African perspective on the situation and make sure that people understand that that is the real narrative.
So the one thing that we're very careful about, because I must state that Africa's Travel Indaba is actually hosted and owned by South African Tourism in partnership with the province of KwaZulu-Natal as well as the city of Durban. So the ownership thereof lies in South Africa. But the one thing that we're very clear about and that we are very conscious about is that we want to make sure that the narrative we drive is not only a South African one, but it's a broader African one. So even our speakers from tomorrow going into the actual trade show are representative of the various countries and the various expertise that lie in the African continent. But because there is no doubt, we've got a lot of experts that are in the African continent. And like you say, during COVID-19, we did experience what felt like was very unfair sanctions against the African continent. But we all rose above that. And we're here. And there are very important learnings from the COVID-19 pandemic that we are actually applying at Africa's Travel Indaba and beyond for, again, the better growth and prosperity of our tourism sector.
Just a quick and final question. Treasury support in the Africa tourism sector is something that's also been lamented. And I want to look at, we've got a new minister that's been appointed as the tourism head, but also there's a whole issue around the whole tourism 1 billion rand Spurs sponsorship deal. There was a furore around it, but at least the motive behind it was explained to us that we need to think outside the box. We need to, create new avenues of growing the sector. So how is this all going to work out, do you think?
What we have done at South African Tourism is that because we are an insights-led organization, we make sure that we use research to inform our decisions. What we know for sure is that we can never show up the same way as we did before COVID, because when COVID hit, it almost as if we're all starting from the same starting point, because then suddenly we all had to elevate our brand presence for the travelers that had the many choices that they could opt for as the world opened up again. So at South African Tourism, currently we are exploring various innovative marketing platforms, those that we've known and those that we've never explored before, so that we can actually elevate our brand presence. And that is what is happening. We are using, the presence of audiences, the affinity towards audiences are looking for, to be able to inform where we actually invest, and of course to be able to inform how we show up, so that we actually become very appealing to those travelers that we so much need for our economy. And that is how we really believe it's going to work out. We've got exciting plans ahead. We've got a brand campaign that we are going to at least introduce here at Africa's Travel Indaba that will seek to give direction in terms of how we're going to show up in terms of marketing communications. And that is what we are planning to do. We do know that as a country, as in as South Africa, but also as a continent, we do have to elevate our destination presence so that travelers can actually opt to come to our continent over above any other continent. And that is what Africa's Travel Indaba seeks to do. And as South African Tourism, we are committed to ensuring that we definitely achieve our mandate of increasing arrivals to South Africa.
Thandiwe, let me thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. She's the General Manager of Tourism South Africa, the Communications and Stakeholder GM. Thandiwe Matibela, speaking about the Travel Indaba, Tourism Indaba rather. It's a very good afternoon to you. Warm welcome. You're watching SABC News Channel. If you've just joined us, this is the week ahead. I'm Tshepiso Makwetla. Now, on the 6th of June 2019, the African Union Peace and Security Council suspended the participation of the Republic of Sudan in all AU activities until the effective establishment of a civilian-led transitional authority as the only way to allow Sudan to exit from its current crisis. Now, 4 years later, and the conflict in the country continues to rage on with no end in sight. The PSC further decided, should the Transition Military Council fail to hand over power to a civilian-led transitional authority, they would have to consider other punitive measures. The Peace and Security Council are again meeting this week to discuss the instability in the Sudan. Under the theme, Silencing the Guns, they will also discuss the war between Russia and Ukraine. We're joined now to talk about this by security expert Chidi Nwanu, London-based consulting security firm Pechavi. Am I saying it correctly? Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So yes, it's Pechavi Consulting.
All right. So let's just first start with the AU's Peace and Security Framework Agreement. Let's examine that, because while they're sitting and discussing the events in the Sudan, there's obviously the continuing crisis in the eastern DRCs. And it would seem, according to critics, that the AU is failing to have an impression on peace and security measures that are long-lasting.
Yeah, so this is a common criticism of the AU, and it's one could argue whether it's fair or unfair. But as you've mentioned, there are several security crises going on around Africa. Ethiopia, fortunately, is just coming to an end. But we've got the Eastern DRC, we've got the ongoing escalating violence in the Sahel, and then obviously now Sudan, going into this unique war. The question, obviously, most people are asking is where is the AU, undertaking the first stage of that of its remit, which is preventing crises? Because none of these crises came out of the effort. They were all, there was a build up to them. Take Sudan in particular, we could see the build up, we could see the breakdown in the relationship to the RSF and the American army. We could see the maneuvering of forces, the pre-deployment of forces, and one would have expected that the AU would have stepped in at this point before force was used and before the situation was kinetic. But there is a lack of that. And then even when we are now in this situation where the conflict has started, we're still not seeing an AU involvement. We're not seeing the peace talks are taking place in Jeddah. The key interlocutors are Saudis, other Gulf states, the United States. The AU is observing rather than actually taking a lead and organizing either the local, the regional groups or using its own offices to hold these talks. So there is quite a serious question there. There is obviously, the counter to that, the AU, because of the nature of the AU and because many of the key member states of the AU, countries like Egypt and Ethiopia, could be said to have a stake in the outcome. It might be difficult for them to be kind of a neutral party, but it's still highly within their remit to undertake this kind of effort.
And as you say that whether the criticism is warranted or not, the question is what is the PSC able to do at the moment? So how does it bridge that gap between intention and action, even though it's been said to be one of the most active and dynamic organs of the AU?
Well, it's the proof of the pudding obviously is in eating. While it's very active in putting out lots of communiques, making these kind of statements, it's actually being able to. The most important thing it should be able to do is bring all the actors around the table. And as we've just discussed, it's not been able to do that. It's been outside actors who've been able to bring the RSF and the army together to speak, even though they're only speaking on humanitarian terms. I mean, the AU, the PSC at this point should be, as I said, bringing the regional bodies together. Ethiopia, Egypt, South Sudan, the South Sudanese have done things kind of by themselves unilaterally. But the AU at this
Hi, Chidi, are you still able to hear us? All right, we'll see if we can reconnect with him. Looking at the AU's Peace and Security Council gathering to discuss particularly the conflict in the Sudan. We'll be back to look at other regional challenges that may be preventing this from arriving at peaceful resolution. Okay, I do believe that we do have him back. Chidi Onwanu, a very good evening, or rather, should I say good afternoon, and welcome back. Let's start with what you were saying, and I want to reflect on the regional challenges. As you said, there are many interested actors in the dialogue who could be influencing the slow pace of the resolution. So the conflict in the Sudan has also been going on for very many years and interconnected, but there's also challenges in the Chad Basin and other areas within the surround. So should the AU have a more holistic approach?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think that's maybe one of the big lessons we can see from the insecurity of the past decade or so is most of Africa's problems are interrelated. The Boko Haram crisis in Nigeria has involved Niger, Chad, Cameroon, and even Benin Republic now is becoming affected by the issues in Mali, Niger, Togo, Northern Ghana. There's a little bit of tension going on there. So it's clear that if you want to solve any of these problems, because most of our borders are artificial, most of our people are interrelated from one country to another, it's clear that you need to have a regional dynamic to it. So this is what I was alluding to earlier. It's important that the AU in particular brings together all the regional actors, try to get a common position. Now, this is problematic because you've got countries like Egypt and Ethiopia who have problems with each other, just on the GERD issue. You've got Sudan and Ethiopia that have problems with each other on border issues. You've got Egypt and Sudan have lots of issues, historical issues between themselves. You've got Chad with its own levels of insecurity and instability. All of these issues need to be brought together by a neutral or common actor who can set out a basic denominator and then from there start building these talks. But unfortunately, as I said, it seems to be external actors, either in the Gulf or the United States, who are doing most of these activities, or individual states like South Sudan.
Has the Peace and Security Council been consistent in its approach on ending some of these conflicts? I mean, I'm just thinking of its what was seen as its endorsement of the Chad military transition, while being quick to suspend the Sudan from the AU for the military coup then. Could this be part of the problem, or are people just being unduly criticizing it?
I think that there is an inconsistency in its approach in the way it addresses certain issues. I mean, suspension of Sudan was a good move. You know, the actions towards Mali, again, have been good, but there's still that lack of consistency. The negotiations with Mali have kind of fallen to the wayside, rather than being strict, you know, with these countries that where you've had an overflow civilian rule. You find that after a while, they kind of get worn down, and there is an element of just trying to compromise. This is what's happened in Sudan. You know, we've compromised with the generals after they overthrew the civilian government. And again, it's not just the AU, it's the Western powers as well who did the same, compromise to the generals, failed to sanction them and held them to account. And obviously, conflict has now come to a head. So a much more robust effort by the AU would be needed. But the AU, very much like the UN, is a creature of its constituent parts. So until the major powers in Africa are able to put aside their own kind of interest, it's going to be very difficult for the AU to take that kind of robust role that we're talking about.
Mm. I'm just also wondering about the capacity to prevent conflict, because it's one thing to talk about conflict when you're already in it and how to end it, but preventative measures are also very important. And are they being overlooked?
You know, I think the key thing is that none of the conflicts that we see across the African continent come out of the blue. There is always a build-up to them, either, you know, ethnic tensions or political tensions. You know, the fortunate thing so far about the Sudanese crisis is that it's mainly political, even though, you know, there's still a lot of loss of life. Once it descends into an ethnic battle where there's, you know, differences in you know, tribe or religion, as happened before with South Sudan, then that becomes where the problems are. So there needs to be a framework, an early warning system where the AU, working with regional bodies, working with individual states, is able to alert to impending crisis and have a clear mechanism where the AU will step in. I mean, there's been a long argument that the AU needs to be a lot more interventionist, like the EU, where, you know, the EU will step in and have, you know, kind of preventative measures. You can see now in Poland, you know, the EU is taking measures against Poland because of certain changes in their law. That's, you know, trying to prevent a future conflict. The AU obviously needs to step up and start taking those kind of preventative steps, you know, rather than waiting until the conflict has started and then, again, rather kind of failing to intervene. There needs to be that build-up conflict, you know, alert mechanism built into the system as well.
Chidi Nwanu, thank you so much for your time, just unpacking some of the possible discussions underway at the AU's Peace and Security Council underway. He's a security expert of a London-based consulting firm. Picture of you, representative. Welcome back. You're watching The Week Ahead here on SABC News Channel now. An energy expert says exempting all schools, hospitals and police stations from load shedding is not practical. This comes after the North Gauteng High Court ruled that hospitals, schools and police stations are to be exempted from rolling blackouts. The United Democratic Movement, or UDM, and other 17 organizations took the matter to court, seeking exemptions for these institutions. The court found that load shedding is an infringement of constitutional rights and has given the Minister of Public Enterprises 60 days to take all reasonable steps that these institutions are exempt from load shedding.
In almost every community, there is a school and there are hospitals and police stations in many others. This leads to concerns that exempting all schools, hospitals and police stations from load shedding is not practical. According to energy expert Jose Moleshe, this may increase the likelihood of intense load shedding for other customers. She says new infrastructure would need to be built as these are interconnected in the national grid.
It's not practical at all, because if you have schools, you have clinics, hospitals, they're all embedded within the communities. And the networks, there are networks with medium voltage networks that go through that. And then you also have municipal grid going through that. So to isolate a particular school is not practical. And what it would do in any case, it would mean that if you were to do that, if say hypothetically it was practical, you would need to then load shed more for others or other areas. So it could lead to a more intense load shedding. They refer to diesel generation. Again, that problem, I think, would, from a budgetary point of view, 6 months perspective, National Treasury goes through a budgetary process for those kind of things. So how practical is that in 6 months? And it will also potentially mean importing of diesel generators and all of that kind of thing. So if you would know that during the national state of disaster, that was proposed. But what was happening is that only specific hospitals could feasibly be done were targeted, and there was infrastructure that needed to be built in order to meet those needs. So you might as well use that.
Minister of Electricity, Dr. Senzo Meyiwa, says the current power cuts have dire impacts on the country's economy. He says about 30 billion rand is spent annually on diesel to keep the lights on. Meyiwa says this is the cost to protect South Africa's economy. Minister Meyiwa says government, alongside Eskom, are working on plans to ensure that power generation is recovered. He says the current energy plan will see about 2,000 megawatts added onto the grid by the end of the calendar year.
The point we're making is that there has to be some degree of agency. You can see some of these projects that they have announced are only connecting end of the financial year, calendar year, some of them next year, but we need to move with speed and address the issue that constitute an emergency as I speak to you, so that we are able to protect if you like, the South African economy.
Let's take a look at the developments. We're joined now by legal expert Mpumelelo Zigalala. Mr. Zigalala, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So a lot of conjecture on what could happen next. I'm calling it a shock verdict. I'd like to hear your views on it. Did it surprise you, the judgment handed down? All right, it seems like that line dropped, but we will get him back on again. Mpumelelo Zigalala, who is an energy expert. Now let's take a look at just some of the challenges South Africans could be facing over the next couple of days, weeks even. They should be bracing themselves for yet another cold winter. So despite short-term measures to deal with the ongoing power crisis, Eskom will not be well short of meeting higher winter energy demands, we're told. The Minister of Electricity, Dr. Senzo Meyiwa, and Eskom warning that the next 5 months will be very tough on South Africans. Right, let's go back to legal expert Mpumelelo Zigalala to just look at that Gauteng High Court judgment. Mr. Zigalala, very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I was saying that some calling it a shock verdict, and as you heard, there's some even questioning whether it would be implementable. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the judgment itself, but also the understanding of the fact that the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, must take all reasonable steps within the next 60 days, the definition thereof.
Definitely, it was amazing. Let me start by saying good afternoon to you and also to the viewers. I think what was happening, the court was saying, Honorable Minister, you are supposed to take up the strategic planning to try and prevent load shedding at all costs. We think that up until now we haven't done so. Now we are going to force you to think on your feet. We're going to force you in terms of finding short-term measures which can be implemented just to make sure that we're able to keep our lights on, especially in critical areas like your schools, your hospitals and police stations. We can't afford to be left in the dark. Now, and make sure that you come back to us in terms of reporting to what you have done, so that you could be able to monitor what you've done correctly, just to ensure that the lights are on. If it means that you have to go by way of environment, the allocation or reallocation of budgets from somewhere to this one to make sure that people are able to have temporary lights either through somewhere or any sort of means. That is what you must do, which is something, by the way, that you should have done a long time ago. So I think the court was saying, well, for now, we are fed up. We think you need to take drastic steps, and one of the things in which we are going to do is to force you to think on your feet and come up with information or short-term measures that can be able to offer relief to the people of South Africa.
Mm. And before we get to what would be considered as reasonable, but also what is it within the realm of possibility, the judgment found that there had been repeated breaches by the state of its constitutional statutory duties, but that these breaches also infringe on citizens' rights to healthcare, security and education. I think this has been spoken about for a while now. What do you think tipped the scale in favor of the organizations that approached the courts?
I think it's the severity of the problem and the period in which one would have endured this type of problem. Now, load shedding has been with us for more than a decade. Now, one would ask the question, if you know that you have a shortage of electricity, what are the interventions are able to provide in light of the conditional obligations that you have? If you are failing to do so, it simply means that you are either failing to understand the magnitude of the problem, or you're simply choosing to ignore it. And the only way in which you can be then employed to do so, or forced to make sure that you're able to provide the relief which is required, is a court order that will force you to act. So that if you don't act, you are found in contempt, and the set of repercussions are going to be there. Because as we speak now, there are no set of repercussions to each other. If a person at ASCOM does not do their job, there is nothing that comes from their non-action. It simply means that they'll have to say, sorry, load shedding has gone on to a larger stage, and it simply ends there. Now, with the court order, I think it has much more weight, and it forces individuals to then sit back and think, what can we do to be able to provide a solution? Now, that can't be said against the backdrop of saying that you have also to understand the resources that we have now. The court is also cognizant of that, and they wouldn't have issued an order in which they would have thought is not implementable. And if it's not implementable, then the minister has plus minus 60 days to come back to the court, even earlier, to say, I know that we gave me an order that I must be able to put the lights on in our schools and hospitals and police stations. I can't do that. The resources are simply not there. Here are the numbers. Here are the financial which we are working with, and we simply cannot afford to have that as our government. But this is the alternative that you come back with, and we think it is an interim relief that can be achieved.
But Melanie, we'll come to the financial imperatives in just a moment. I'm just curious about something. ISCOM saying that the sheer number of facilities that would have to be excluded from load shedding would put immense strain on the system and could possibly trigger a national blackout. If we're saying that the constitutional rights of individuals have been trampled by these very institutions being load shed, could we then not argue that the interests of the majority need to be respected if implementing this means a total blackout? Or how are we just so used to listening to excuses that we just go along with it?
Not necessarily. In fact, it starts with our constitution. Section 36 provides a limitation of rights, which is a formula that one uses in order to limit those rights. So we're basically saying, I will take or take away from your rights the little that I can, just to make sure that you're able to survive, and it must be proportionate to the type of demand or the problem which I'm facing. So the court in this case indirectly is saying, well, Minister, just go and check once again whether there is a budget which can be reallocated, are there certain things that can be able to utilize, talk with the counterpart in Treasury and see whether there can be reallocations which are going to be able to deal with load shedding. In instances where you are usually nice to have, and for example, like for traveling and FNC expenses, can't you cut away from those and concentrate on making sure that the lights are on? It's for the greater good of the public. Most importantly, the protection of the rights of our constitution is stated earlier. But let's take away from somewhere so that you can be able to provide light. This time, you are not only doing it on your own and not being monitored. You are going to do it when there's a court order that has forced you to do so, and the repercussions of not being able to adhere to the court order that you're going to be in contempt, and it's definitely a place that you don't want to find yourself.
All right. Now, finally, to talk about the financial imperatives that you hinted at earlier on. So Friday's judgment notes that where it's impossible to isolate embedded buildings and spare them from load shedding, that Minister Gordon must ensure that generators and other alternate energy suppliers are secured to ensure uninterrupted power supply. But I'm just wondering, does this open the way for another sort of state of disaster to ensure that there is funding that is sourced for this?
It definitely does. I can foresee a number of governments, a number of budget reallocations which are going to take place, especially from each department. Public Works for one, Department of Health and even Education will have to take a bit of reallocation so that you're able to adhere to this court order. I think the Department of Public Enterprises, they can't do it on their own. The only thing that they have to provide on their side is infrastructure, and simply say, if you can be able to procure these things on your own so that you are not found at concerns, can you please go ahead and do so? But most importantly, to go back to the court and tell it if you can't, and be able to bring in those innovative solutions, and so that you're able to say, this is what we are trying to do, this is the little that we could do with the budget which is allocated to us. Anything beyond that is beyond our control. Hopefully the court will be able to understand. So I think in this case, the court is really saying, or even the litigants are saying, we left it on to our parliamentarians to apply or to play the monitoring role. And simply they say, because if they hadn't failed, we wouldn't be enduring load shedding for the past decade. So now we're trying to force the court to say, if you do not provide those innovative solutions that you get paid for to provide, this is the repercussions are going to follow. And part of it is the budget allocations, finding the budget where we work, and make sure that you're able to provide the solution that is required. In my opinion, if you're able to reallocate budget during COVID, and you're able to make sure that the impact of COVID is not as severe as it was, you know that there are complications and transgressions that followed back then, which I'm sure we've learned a few lessons from. Surely you can do it with no shedding, because it's really affecting individuals on a daily basis.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and insights. Much appreciated. Legal expert Mpumelelo Zigalala is just sharing his thoughts about pretty much what will be talk of the week ahead. The ESCOM legal case outcome, 17 organizations saying that the state must be forced to exempt from load shedding some of these essential entities like hospitals, schools and police stations, saying it can be done. And you're back with the week ahead now. The Senzo Meyiwa murder trial has been postponed to Monday after Sipho Ramosepele, the lawyer representing accused 1 and 2, said he was unwell. Ramosepele continued his cross-examination of Mthokozisi Twala, the second witness to take the stand, who was inside the house when Meyiwa was killed. Twala has so far described the moments that led to the soccer star's death, claiming 2 intruders entered the house.
So it was a short day under cross-examination as the lawyer representing accused 1 and 2 fell ill.
Perhaps you could take a short adjournment. I'm also not feeling well. I'm not feeling well now.
Earlier in cross-examination, Mthokozisi Twala refused to be drawn into whether the crime scene had been tampered with.
There's evidence that a witness has been at the scene before the police arrived, so that they can see the number of consumed alcohol in the house.
In no position, or I don't know how to respond to that, because after going to the hospital, I didn't come back to the house.
And that they were all caught by surprise when the alleged intruders entered the house.
Before the alleged intruders or robbers entered the house, did you hear at the door area, the kitchen door area, did you hear any noises, sounds, or anything unusual at that area just before they entered the area?
No, nothing.
Did you see a hand perhaps on the handle of the kitchen door, pushing the door and entering, somebody entering?
Where I was seated, I don't think I would have been able to see that.
He described again how Meyiwa charged towards one of the intruders after Longwe Twala managed to flee.
I remember seeing Senzo getting up. In fact, now the people now stood up, and then Senzo approached or went straight to the person with the firearm, pushed him, and they pushed each other towards the kitchen.
When did the second person enter the house?
The second one I noticed at the time when Longwe was about to exit the house. That's when I saw that there was a second person at the back.
Twala was unable to describe both the gun or the knife brandished by the alleged intruders. Cross-examination continues on Monday. Crisalda Lewis, SABC News at the High Court in Pretoria.
The 6 people accused of aiding and abetting convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester to escape from the Mangaung Correctional Centre will only know their fate this coming week. This, as their bail application has been postponed to 11 and 12 May. The defence in this matter has submitted to the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court that the case has to be treated as a matter of urgency.
For the first time since her arrest, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana appeared in the dock without covering her face. She faces charges of aiding and abetting convict Thabo Bester to escape from prison as well as violating a dead body. She appeared alongside her 5 co-accused to apply for bail. Senoe Matswara, Tebo Dipulu, Mutanyane Masukela and the 2 latest arrests, Tieho Makhotsa and Natasha Johnson, all face charges of aiding and abetting a convict to escape as well as defeating the ends of justice. Magudumana's father is out on 10,000 rand bail. The case has been postponed to accommodate the 2 new accused. The defense has indicated to the court that the bail application will need a minimum of 3 days.
It will be in the interest of justice for this court to adjourn the case to the date of the 12th, or rather the 11th and to the 12th. It is clear that the duration of this bail application cannot be guaranteed at this juncture.
The family of Katlego Bereng, whose charred body was found in Bester's cell, has called for no bail for all the accused. The family says it needs answers on how their son ended up in cell 35 and needs closure.
All we know is that whoever is involved doesn't deserve bail. And we are going there to represent the family, to be part of this process, so that at the end of the day we can all get closure. There can be consequences.
Bloemfontein Celtic Supporters Club has described Katlego Bereng as a vibrant young person who led his branch with enthusiasm. The club has also called for no bail against the accused.
He was the deputy chairperson of the branch of Kopanum branch, and he was the youngest in that committee, I think. He was one of the passionate supporters of Bloemfontein Celtic, one of the persons that easy to work with, vibrant, passionate, colorful, always willing to help, a good singer, a good song creator.
2 Bloemfontein-based civil movements say it's important for Katlego Bereng's family to know that it has the support of the community. They've also made a plea to the court not to grant the accused bail.
Be here is very much important to make sure that justice must be served for Katlego and the whole family. That is the motion that we are here, and we still saying that no bail for the Magurumanas and the rest of other implicated people.
Also as civil society, as community members on the ground, that we feel that justice must be served for Katlego.
The case of 2 former G4S employees, Tieho Makhotsa and Natasha Johnson, who are the latest to be arrested in the Bester saga, has been joined with the other accused in the matter. Kamogelo Siekwi, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Parliament is racing against time to meet the Constitutional Court deadline to rectify or develop legislation that would recognize Muslim marriages. The delay could be intensified as there are 2 proposed legislations on the table. Mercedes Besant reports that as the 2 proposals come head-to-head in the Home Affairs Committee this week, these are some of the possibilities.
The Concord declared that the common law definition of marriage is inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid, as it excludes Muslim marriages. Both the Marriages and Divorce Acts were found to be inconsistent with the Constitution. It was also found that the Divorce Act fails to make provision for the redistribution of assets when a Muslim marriage is dissolved.
There are 2 pieces of proposed legislation on the table. One is a private member's bill by Al-Jama Member of Parliament Hanif Hendricks. The other one is an executive bill which has been prepared by the Ministry of Home Affairs. The debate is whether to go for the private members' bill, which will only focus on Muslim marriages, or the inclusive omnibus bill for all marriages that will also cater for married women of all religious groupings.
The private members' bill, which is an interim relief measure to respond to the Concord judgment, is ready. The Minister of Home Affairs also made his presentation on how far the process was on the marriages bill. However, there were questions on whether the executive bill will be on time to meet the Concord deadline.
The court gave 24 months for the President and Cabinet, together with Parliament, to remedy the defects that are mentioned, that this private members bill seeks to address. And as Honourable Hendricks mentioned, that time period ends on the 28th of June 2024. So this is what is required of us. And unfortunately, we've seen it before. We've had to go to the court again and again to request for extensions. This shouldn't become the norm. It shouldn't become acceptable for us. We have a bill here that is meant to be a temporary measure until such time as the Marriage Act is in place. And the reality is we have pretty much this year and early next year, Parliament will start, and then we're going into elections.
There were other questions from lawmakers with regard to the private members' bill.
But then on the other hand, the question before us is whether we want to proceed with a private members' bill or go with a executive bill as outlined by the minister. And of course, naturally, in my case, I would lean towards the executive bill because it seeks to protect more groups. In other words, it seeks to give more legal certainty to marriages of a variety of groups, whether Jewish, Muslim, or traditional marriages, as the minister outlined.
The ANC also believes that one single bill may be the best option.
And in particular, if you look at the marriage bill, that is going to take care of all women, not just Muslim women. And I'm saying this because even if we had to accept this particular private members bill, what will happen is that you find women from other cultures and other religions seeing themselves excluded. And it's important then to ask ourselves whether we're going to, at that point, then have a separate bill for each of them. But rather you have this one bill that is now going to take care of everything.
But Hendricks disagreed.
Also, the Constitutional Court only dealt with Sharia marriages. For the last 20 years, this has been in our courts, it has been in Parliament, it has been in Home Affairs. No other community came forward, but I'm not correct. The gay community came forward and they got their bill. The civil union people came forward and they got their bill. So there has not been the same urgency as far as the dignity of Muslim wives is concerned. And that's why the Constitutional Court came down very hard on the President, on government and Parliament, including myself, because I'm a member of Parliament.
Hendricks believes that the Concord judgment has been misinterpreted by Home Affairs.
So the Constitutional Court, the Honourable Chair, wanted immediate relief, and the department responded within a week or two with a circular. So that circular, in my opinion, misinterpreted the judgment and further harms the dignity of Muslim women who want to practice Sharia in their marriage. I don't think that was done, that was done deliberately. So we have presented a circular that will comply with the tenets of Islam and comply with the Constitutional Court.
The ministry acknowledged the critical role played by Hendricks.
The other thing, Chairperson, it is true that quite a number of matters have been going to court. It might be possible that because of the activism and determination of people like Honorable Hendricks, which he is, the issue of Muslim marriages and the suffering of the women there might have gained prominence more than others because those others do not have a champion You are a true champion, Mr. Hendricks, but the others did not have.
Motsoaledi also explained what the executive bill hopes to achieve for all marriages.
That we said whatever we're doing, the outcome must reflect three things at all times. The issue of human dignity, the issue of equality, the issue of non-discrimination. Yes, Honorable Chair, we did take a long time, even in the development of white paper, because in some cultures and religions, words like equality are not easily accepted. And we were challenged. We were challenged by certain traditional authorities on the issue of equality, especially among wives. We know we are still, by and large, living in a hugely patriarchal society.
A decision was taken to continue with more engagements before processing any of the bills.
I want the members of the committee to be broader in terms of the thought process when we're going to more deliberate on the decision process to consider the two presentations, whether we need to move with the private members bill or the executive bill. And Honorable Zell, you're correct that we may need to afford space for members to go and solicit proper and guidance so that when you come back, at least we're able to deal with this matter.
There is now close to 14 months left for Parliament to meet the Constitutional Court deadline to either rectify or develop legislation that would recognize Muslim marriages. Mercedes Besant, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, that's how we come to the end of the show today. This is The Week Ahead. Thank you so much for joining us. Do join us again next week for the Week in Review. Until the next time, it's goodbye from us. Take care.